Stands as a power system in JoJo grant their users unique psychic abilities which allow them to perform supernatural feats, be it control the elements, stop time, or even manipulate the world around them. Though there are some abilities that most stand users share, better understood as rules of the psychic powers themselves, be it their ethereal nature which allows them to phase through some objects or people and be unperceivable by non-stand users, or how stand users can communicate with each other through their stands. Though one strange ability that doesn't get brought up too often is a little thing called stand shrinking, and that's the aspect of stands I'd like to talk about today. So, stand shrinking is a concept introduced in Part 3 during the Steely Dan fight, when Kakyoin and Polnareff needed to enter Joseph's brain to defend it from Dan's stand, the Lovers, which is naturally microscopic and would be impossible to fight otherwise. And from this arc on, the ability is used very rarely throughout the series by most other stand users, making a grand total of 2 appearances in the entirety of JoJo, that being its introduction and as a minor use during the Soft Machine fight. And due to this limited use, it led people to question why. Why wasn't it used more often in the series? Well, there's actually quite a few reasons for it, but before we get too into that, let's discuss the common misconceptions when it comes to stand shrinking. First, the idea of shrinking one stand down appears to be in reference to the 1987 movie Inner Space, which in itself inspired a lot of the aspects of the Steely Dan arc, as it involves Lieutenant Tuck Pendleton shrinking themselves down in an experimental shrinking device and ending up in the wrong body, and then eventually ending up near the brain and helping control the new body that he's in. Next, I should clear up the difference between stand shrinking and stands that shrink. So, in the later parts of JoJo, such as Part 5 and Part 6, we have stand users like Formaggio and Guess, who have stands with major abilities that can shrink others in different ways. This itself is different than the ability of stand shrinking, as even though someone like Guess can shrink another stand user and that target stand shrinks with them, since the shrunken person isn't doing anything specifically different, their stand's reduced size is only a byproduct of Guess's stand. As we learn that when someone is using stand shrinking, it's a conscious effort by either the stand or the user, and ends up draining more stand energy to maintain the shrunken form than in its normal form. This is because when one is using stand shrinking, they are focusing on making a projected image of their psychic abilities smaller, along with focusing the accuracy of their abilities to match that reduced size. Essentially, it takes a lot of concentration, and while you could argue in the case of Guess that Stone Free only shrank because its main body is made from Jolene's, who at the time was small as well, in the case of Little Feet and Formaggio, when they shrank Narancia, Aerosmith shrank with him as well. And mentioning Narancia and Formaggio, it would appear that a key difference between stand shrinking and shrinking stands is that, in the case of stand shrinking, the overall power of the stand is not reduced, as Silver Chariot and Hierophant Green were fighting at the same level they would be at normal size, with Hierophant Green specifically doing a really impressive feat latching onto the Lovers as it fled from Joseph and returned to Dan, likely stretching itself longer than it had ever done before. Whereas with shrinking stands, the power of the user and their stand is reduced along with their size. A great example being Aerosmith's once deadly bullets, after being shrunk, were rendered useless against Formaggio at his full size. Now along with this, stand shrinking is an ability that is really only able to be applied to certain types of stands as well, specifically ones that are made of visual projections of energy. So things like bound stands, for instances, cannot be stand shrunk, as it is more so energy being sent through a natural object and granting it an ability rather than it being generated from the user's stand energy itself. So this means, sadly, you cannot have a pocket-deployed Superfly. Along with this, while nothing explicitly states that tool stands can't be stand shrunk, I imagine it would only make their jobs harder. Imagine Whole Horse with a miniature Emperor. Which actually leads me to my main point, as to why stand shrinking hasn't been more common in JoJo. And to put it simply, it's just not necessarily a useful ability, as while you don't lose power on your end, you do invest a lot more resources than you're getting back in return, as reducing your stand not only makes you lose out on protection, both by the fact that having your stand be so small makes it vulnerable to attacks, as we see with the Lovers being able to damage and cut Silver Chariot, but also enemy stands of normal sizes now can just strike a larger amount of your stand with each hit, which would just be reflected onto you. Along with this, in a more one-on-one scenario, you also lose out on your stand protecting you from other stands, as recalling and regrowing a shrunken stand takes time, and if it reaches a wall that is too thick, then it'll be trapped. Also, given that there are a lot of stand users with humanoid stands that can just sort of channel their stand inside of their body, they can do this to protect themselves, so it'd be hard for you to even enter an unwilling body to begin with. Along with this, while inside of a body, at a reduced size, the stand could have trouble phasing through thick objects, be it either a thick blood vessel in Joseph's body or a pipe in the boat. A shrunken stand can't seem to move through it. Thus, if you're not careful, you can easily get your stand stuck. And on top of all of that, this ability was only discovered via a gamble by a seasoned stand user, so that you can assume that the average stand user likely wouldn't attempt anything like stand shrinking because they have no reason to assume that they even could. And even a lifelong stand user like Polnareff needed to have it suggested to him, so newer stand users likely are still grasping the basics before they tried anything advanced like this. And then finally, after all of those downsides, you also are burning through stand energy much quicker than you normally would. Though this does raise an interesting question, because if you can shrink your stand by focusing on condensing the image created by your stand energy into a smaller form, could you not do the same in reverse? Like, increase the size of your stand. As well, it wouldn't really increase the power of the stand, so most stands that could wouldn't really benefit from it. Imagine stands like Bad Company with stand growth. Now that's scary. Though, with that all said and done, I hope this video helped clear up any questions you had on stand shrinking, and helped you maybe think about stands in a more interesting way. I always found the concept and usage of stands' natural abilities to be really cool, and this one is no different. And while I'd love for there to be an arc that featured this power again, given its requirement, I doubt we'll ever see stand shrinking used in any major capacity in JoJo ever again. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/medinotthebadguy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does, and if you want to see some more unique abilities of stands, well, I can guarantee you that you'll see something truly unique from Shimonetta, a boring world where the concept of dirty jokes doesn't exist at byshimonetta.com.